The last time I saw so many people in a room in this building was the day I was here for my interview. And I will say, I'm still nervous, but in a different way. I do know it's a friendly audience, and I appreciate that. But really, welcome back, and welcome to the new academic year. I want to start by saying a few things about what we'll focus on this fall in the college. First and foremost, the return to campus. That's top on everyone's mind, and restoring or resuming a normal life in the building. And for me, of course, this is really exciting because I haven't seen the building in a normal way in the last year since I arrived. A year ago, we had some sort of weather incident, and I think there were 5 of us. Some of you are in the room, maybe all of you are in the room. I think you're all in the room, because I'm seeing you. And we had to go down sort of into the basement, the first floor, because there was a tornado warning and the alerts came over the phones and all of that. That was it in a big building like this. So this is very different for me, and I'm really happy about that. The building, is now 10 years old. It's a nice anniversary. Any anniversary is good, but it's good to pause at this moment to reflect on that. Many of you were here, or some of you at least were here when the building went up. And to celebrate this anniversary, I think it's important to look at spaces and start to think about how we might take the building into the next 10 years. One thing we're doing, and it's ready to go as far as I know, right, Teresa, is we are opening up a faculty staff lounge. And that's in 3316. I hope you'll visit it at some point, in the next week or so before you get really busy. But I'm hoping that throughout the year, it will become a space for people to go outside of their department, to meet with colleagues, to meet with people in other departments, to mix and mingle with staff and faculty at the same time. And I'm also going to start hosting a monthly brown bag in that space. Unless turnout is so big, then we'll have to change venues. But the idea is it's something I believe we've really needed. I started my career at a larger institution, and what really in a foreign country, and what made it much easier for me to adjust and get to know people and actually begin to partner on grants and projects was the faculty lounge. There were multiple faculty cafeterias at the same time, not just a lounge. But I would walk in there, and I didn't know who I would meet. I didn't know what language they would speak, or if I could understand it or speak it back. And that was fine. It was really great. It was, for me, a lifesaver, and it really helped me professionally, not just personally. We will have some Keurig machines in there so that if you want to have tea or coffee, we'll have that available. So that's one thing to look forward to. In LA 31C, it's an open student space right now. It's already looking a little bit different, but by the end of the fall, it should actually be ready to go. A glass wall will be put up, or that's at least what I call it, and it'll be a student collaborative workspace. Now, you probably will never have any reason to use that, but I want to use this as a test case for our college to see what kind of use it receives. And so that means for the fall, it's probably too late for most of you to think, well, what collaborative project could I add to my class? If you have a collaborative project, please encourage students to use it. But it really won't be ready until the end of the semester. So it would have to be then. But as you're thinking already, or begin to think about spring semester, consider how your assignments in class could help the students to make use of this space. It's good for them to have that space, to practice in a safe environment what they might be doing in their careers outside of here, right? And so that's another new thing to look forward to in the building. We've already begun, what I call a beautification project of the building. Not that the building isn't beautiful already, but let's take it to the next step. So there are a lot of blank spaces, blank walls in the building, especially where students spend a lot of their time. So we will be making them a little bit less blank in a variety of ways, with images, artwork, I'm particularly interested in student artwork, so I'll put a call out to the chairs in a few weeks, describing what kinds of things we're looking for and how to submit prospective pieces of art for the wall. And then we have a couple of interactive screens that will be working soon. And the idea there is to have sort of what you would experience in a museum, where you can interact with an exhibit or a project, not a project in a museum, but an exhibit. And here I would like to have the same sort of setup so that student research findings or student project could go up on the screens and the viewer has an opportunity to interact, to bring it alive without having the creator of that research finding right there on the spot. And then the final part, the other thing that we're going to be focusing on, is we'll be finalizing the strategic plan. We worked a lot on that in the spring semester. The results I thought were fantastic. We worked through the Chair's Council and then through the council, the College Council, and the committees in the college. And that should have all filtered back to you and the departments and then back up to the Chair's Council. And the results it made my work much easier. Let me say the results were of such high quality. So we'll be finalizing that this fall, and a lot of our focus this entire year, not just the fall, will be on how do we transition, how do we support the transition to an R2 university, okay? And there are a lot of questions around that, and there'll be more questions around it. That's fine. But in order to do that, we really need to deepen the connections and relationships and collaborations between our departments, all right? And this is something that will be critical in not only our work in the building, but also in our ability to successfully get grants and larger grants. Right now, our scholarship production in the college is quite high. Grant production is very low. So that has to change. And grant production is what's important moving toward R2 status. So a scholarship, but typically with grants, scholarship, follows, right? Or goes along with it. So those go hand in hand. We will also have to, in order to get to that point, rebalance the teaching load. Okay, we all have awareness of that. We've talked about it. That's teaching, scholarship, and service. And the chairs know that we've already begun seriously thinking about that. So this week we had a chairs retreat, and half of the day we spent on discussing how could each department actually adjust that teaching load. So everyone submitted a plan in advance of the retreat, and I'm now in the process of looking at those very carefully, and then we'll work with that this fall. That adjustment means that we're going to have investment from the university, which we will get. And that means not just a replacement of faculty members as they leave and retire, but also we need to add. So what the strategic plan called for was a very ambitious number of new tenure faculty members, and I actually added a little bit to it, but now we have to connect it to departments and the needs and teaching and all of those kinds of details. But it's exciting work. I think it's very forward work. And it's a 10-year project, right? So even though the chairs asked for a high number of new faculty lines, it won't happen right away. But it needs to start happening pretty soon. What does pretty soon mean? Maybe not this year, but the following year, because we're still recovering from the COVID year, and we're in a very good position as a university, but still, enrollment is down, and you notice that in your enrollments, in your class enrollments. A couple of other things to look forward to this fall. You may remember from spring semester that I talked about having a commemorative events calendar, and so there is a committee that met and put together their recommendations, and we're going to be meeting very soon to discuss their recommendations. They're not my recommendations, okay, because that to me, while it's important that I have things I would like to commemorate, I really want to know what everyone in the community thinks is important and valuable. So we'll be working on that. And the idea there is that you can connect maybe events in your programs or activities in your classes to some of these commemorative moments. And when I say moments, I told the committee I'm not interested in particular days only. It might be a week, it might be a month. It doesn't have to be one date on the calendar. So what they suggested was exactly that. It was a variety of things, days, weeks, and months. The Democracy Today Committee has also met, and we're going to continue, actually launch their formal work in the fall semester. So last year, you may remember, I introduced my initiative or theme for the college, and that is Democracy Today. I've been thinking about this for a long time, not in the last year alone. It's something I've thought for several years. I think the events of last year make this type of theme for a College of Liberal Arts even more important, right? We talk a lot about critical thinking, and we really do work hard on critical thinking, but in reality, most universities say that. Most universities work on it, and yet the results in our society look quite different. So we're going to, the committee will, I've charged them with coming up with a few critical texts, short. I don't know what short means to most people. My mind would be like between 20 and 30 pages. Nothing too jargon-ridden, something that all of us, regardless of our discipline, can be able to read and understand without having a dictionary and a glossary and all of that. Then by the end of the semester, come up with an umbrella definition of democracy. So we have a working definition with which to move forward. If we don't have a working definition like this, then everyone comes in with a variety of different ideas about democracy, and they may not come together very well. We need some kind of focus. It doesn't mean that there won't be flexibility. In fact, the idea of an umbrella definition implies that. So that's something to look forward to. You know that last year I introduced something called DOTS, right? Dean's Office Tips. And I'm going to continue that. I think that was a really good thing for us to have to keep us, in communication with each other and sort of feeling a sense of community. And I had a number of different areas that I focus on that I'm going to continue. One is called in the classroom, that has to do with teaching. Another is in the field, that has to do with research. Another was at home, that has to do with, well, for last year, the focus there, or the requests I had, were about how to de-stress in a very stressful, unknown time, right? And that's not my specialty, so I relied a lot on other people to help me with that. But I also started a list of podcasts, blogs, and websites. And we put together, I hope I counted right, a list of 37 podcasts. Now, I am new to podcasts. I think I've said that enough times. Everyone knows that. I started listening to them for the first time last year. I'm hooked on them and realized 37 is a pretty big number, and there are lots more. Many of those were suggestions from people sitting in this room, so I encourage you to send me more examples of the podcasts you think others might benefit from, and they don't have to have anything to do with academia, right? But I do edit those. Like some of them I received might have been a little bit inappropriate for sensitive audiences, so those probably won't appear on my list. But I will welcome your contributions, and I'll communicate with the chairs more about what I'm looking for in a few weeks. I also launched Coffees with the Dean. So those were for first and second year tenure track and non-tenure track faculty. This year I'm going to continue and include the one tenure track faculty member that we hired for the fall. And so it'll be with first, second, and third year faculty. And the conversations will center on professional life. Like, what does it actually mean to have a professional life in higher ed? What does it mean to become a professor? Many people who come straight from graduate school, like I did and probably many of you, don't really know. You know what it's like to be a graduate student, and now you're coming to an institution and maybe all or most of your time has been spent off campus remotely. So what does this mean? And then what is really important to do on your path to tenure? What role should faculty play? What role should you play in creating a strategic plan, or helping us figure out questions surrounding teaching and learning and so forth. So those conversations, I think, were really helpful last year. That was the feedback I got. That was my feeling as well. We'll continue that, but sort of in a sort of higher level rather than what we did last year, because those who participated do not want, I'm sure, a repeat of what we did last year. So these are just a few of the different ways for us to come back to campus, rebuild or build community, or if you're new or relatively new, to find a community in the college, in the building. And I hope you take advantage of some of them. I don't expect that you would take advantage of all of them. There are too many things, and they don't apply to everyone in the college. I want to say a few general things about the return to campus. So a lot of information has come out in the last week or two, and there's a feeling among the chairs that it's a little bit hard to keep track of everything. So next week in the dean's office, we will be working on a 1-2-page document, might be 1.5 pages, just sort of a simple list with links that collates a lot of that information. And it could be your go-to sheet, right, for the semester. So you just click on those and get there fast, and you don't have to look like I do often through email folders, email messages, strings of email, and so forth. It becomes a little bit confusing. The information is all on the website, but it's not always easy to find. As a newcomer still, and I do still consider myself a newcomer, it can be hard for me to negotiate the website. So there are going to be bumps in the road. We understand that. It's important for you to communicate to your chair, and then the chairs will communicate with me. I would recommend that we are as generous as we can, within reason, with each other and students. Be firm and realistic, okay? And keep in mind why we're here. Okay, we're here, as we would all agree, to educate students, educate another generation. We lost more than 1,000 students between last spring and this fall. That's a lot, mostly in the second and third, the rising sophomores, rising juniors. That's where the biggest attrition happened. That's a lot for any institution. It's very large for Towson. What does that mean? It's not just a matter of a budget item, okay? The university is in very sound shape budgetarily. It means that we've lost those 1,000 students probably forever. We know, the research shows, they won't, the majority of them will never return to university or college and get a degree. That's not what we're in this profession for. We're here to make sure that we help students better their lives. We want to help transform their lives, transform their communities, and possibly even corners of the world or more. So that's why we're here. It won't be easy all the time for us as we, figure out the changing landscape of what's going on out there in the world. That's totally beyond our control. But those students have committed to coming here. The dormitories are robust. Their parents are committed to having them here. And at the very least, we have to commit to serve them and help them too, with some modifications of how we do our practice, including this mask, right? And I should say about the mask, it can be very uncomfortable. So this might be the generosity part. It can be very uncomfortable to walk through the halls already and see students without masks. That's going to happen. On the way up here, I walked out of the dean's office. There's that study space, and someone was there without a mask. And I just said, you have to have your mask. That's all I said. He got it, put it on right away. That happens. Well, it's happened a number of times this week alone. So, I think a lot of people probably figure, well, no one's around, or it's a quiet enough space. That's not enough. We have to have the mask on. The next thing I want to say is a few words about safety in the building. We've been away a long time, all right? So we just want to remind everybody about safety procedures. So I've never been through these drills, but I know in the fall we will be having some opportunities to remind ourselves or learn, if you're new, how do you get out of the building if there's a fire? What do you do in case of inclement weather? Active shooter training. And so the chairs will actually receive their own active shooter training. And I'm working on a few other things. This is not to raise any concerns, but that's the world we live in, right? So we want to just try to remember, if you have a new colleague who has never been on campus or was only on campus half a year before we went on lockdown, in the meantime, you might just want to, keep an eye out. Should there be a fire alarm, make sure they understand what to do and so forth. Ask Teresa if you're not sure what you should do. But before you ask Teresa, why don't you ask your department? Ask your administrative assistant, your chair, and they're, going to be able to help you as well. When you're in the building, if you see something that doesn't look right, I just want to remind you, things didn't always look right this last year. Don't hesitate to do something about it. I'm not saying to go up and intervene or try to solve a problem, but if you think it requires a call to TUPD, do it. Okay, call them. If you see someone who's having a medical emergency, if you can talk to them and say, what's going on? Are you all right? Do you need help? That would be fine, but don't hesitate to call for help. 911 is fine. Remember that they may seem like they don't want intervention, but later they may be very grateful, even if they don't remember who helped them or who you are. So just be aware of other people's behavior. We've all spent a lot of time alone, maybe in small places, very familiar places, and now suddenly we're coming back to something we used to know, but in a very different way. So let's just, try to make the best of it and be as generous yet firm as we can. Travel support. Travel support has been reinstated, so I've already started approving for conferences. That's important to know, but foreign travel is far more difficult. So for the United States, as I speak, we will be able to approve. For going abroad, it will depend on the travel warnings for each country. Right now, I think that's not, it's not something that we'll be able to easily approve in the next few months, but maybe in January things will change, hopefully. I want to introduce our new faculty, full-time faculty. I don't know if any of them are here because I can't tell with the masks, and I don't know that I met them all, but we have 3. I announced them on Mondays. Welcome back, so I'm going to repeat it right now since we're in a smaller group. If you're here, can you just raise your hand? You don't have to stand up. Just raise your hand. Jose Gonzalez, lecturer in Spanish. Is Jose here? Okay. And then, hold on. Next one, Emily Kaufman in geography. Okay. Lauren Moriello, lecturer in criminal justice. All right. Well, we welcome them. And when you see them around, give them a hand. Show them around the building, or at least say hi and be pleasant and be happy for them for choosing Towson, because they choose us as much as we choose them. So I have just a few closing thoughts. There are really a few memories from the summer. And so I want to share them with you. There are many more, but these are just a few. So every day when I would go home and walk out that back door from the dean's office, that space I mentioned earlier where students study and so forth, I would see the same two young women studying. They were studying together. So at first I didn't realize they were studying together, and then when I did, I asked them, like, what are you studying for? It was the middle of summer. I thought, are they really in classes? They could have been. They were studying for the dental admissions test, and they were there every single day when I left, and working very hard. They were there this week, and I had to tell them, put your masks on. But in any case, I don't know their names. I didn't ask their names. I probably wouldn't. I'm not good at names. I probably wouldn't have remembered. I don't know if they knew who I was. I was just this guy coming out of that door every day at about 5:30 or 6. But I felt like that connection was important to me. I don't know about to them. And in the end, I told them, I think they're both going to do really well on the exam. Now, I don't know that, but they were working so hard, and all these mathematical equations and who knows what. Maybe they weren't even mathematical, but as a historian, that looked like it to me. In any case, then, I started meeting some of you in my office this summer, and some of you just dropped in. It was wonderful. It was really great. Paul is always there, and so she knows if I can't talk or if I'm not in the office, but I do appreciate that. And I met most of you in my office before we put the masks on, so now I don't recognize you again. But I did like that very much. I met with I think Francis came in. Did Francis come in? Oh, there's Francis. So you probably know Francis Washburn. Sorry, I'm calling you out. But Francis is our major gift officer and has had me active over the summer. And one of the most interesting people I met the whole year was a retired faculty member from this college, retired history professor named Armin Ruck, who's currently, I think, 96 years old, maybe 97, in fantastic shape. Something for us to aspire to, I would say, but I don't think it's much choice for most of us. It happens the way it happens. And he's living on his own in a nearby retirement residence in Towson, where other retired Towson faculty members live. And he told us a lot of stories. He started working here in 1965. He retired in 1999. And apparently he used to come on campus actively, or I should say regularly, until a few years ago. And he told us about his life story. He told us a lot about the history of Towson, which for me was great to hear. He's someone who was born in Germany 8 years before the Nazis came to power. He had no idea who they were. All he knew is there was an election and these people came to power. He was an 8-year-old, right? What would he know? But his family was against the Nazis. So then he told us about what that meant to be a German who was against that oppressive regime. So it was very interesting to listen to him talk about that. He related that to, freedoms today in our country and in other countries. And he's very interested in returning one day this fall to the campus just to visit maybe one of our events, maybe to visit with one of you or a group of you or some students. So it's a little bit hard to recommend anything now with the masks, so we won't. But, if he does, I'll be reaching out to chairs, and I think it would be really nice if we could at least, have a little gathering to talk with him. Maybe it has to be Zoom. He's very, by the way, into his computer and knows the tech guy there at the residence and so forth. He was an impressive man, I'll say that. And then I met a few of our forensic anthropology students. So I happened to be in the lab several times, and so I got to meet them sort of one time, at least I was introduced. The second time I went back with one of our donors. One student was in there only. And the lucky thing is that both the students both have the same name. So it was very easy for me to use one name and be right. And so we just talked to her, and the donor asked some questions. This student exuded excitement and enthusiasm about the program and talked a lot about her future career. And I thought, how wonderful. I mean, this is exactly what we want. Nobody planned that meeting. She had no idea we were coming. She was just talking spontaneously, but you could really feel how genuine she was. Donor was impressed. I was really impressed as well. So I thought that was great. It was so inspiring to meet with her and then have the rest of the day and the rest of the week to draw on that enthusiasm. And then, of course, I got to know the campus better because I finally got to walk around and go into different buildings and different parts. And one of my favorite, of course, parts is the Glen. It's not even a building. Someone had shown me that in the fall semester and said, oh, there's what it is. And I actually went over and walked through it and then figured out I can't actually walk through it and get out the other end. But it was nice. And I also had a lovely tour of the new science complex that the Dean Vanko gave me. And so I began to appreciate the campus in a different way. And to me, all of those experiences really point to the richness of our college and our university and remind me of the important roles we play in people's lives, our students and our colleagues as well. So that's what I have to say today, and we have some time before the reception begins, and I hope you came also for the reception. That would be nice to see you there. But if you have any questions, I'm willing to take questions, and then I'll remove myself from this podium. I don't know. Anyway. Well, yeah, I think we're recording, so better. So 1, 2, we'll start right here. Yes, go ahead,
It
Sharon.
could be me, but I just noticed that the Wi-Fi in this building seems worse than before, and, okay, it's not me. And what can be done, because it's just kind of challenging sometimes with some of the technical kind of dead space.
You just did it.
Teresa will answer.
Okay.
The response is you just did it. Let me know about it, because if you don't say anything, I can't act.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks for raising that. So if you have any problems like with Wi-Fi or technical issues or other problems in the building, let Teresa know, that's for sure. Thanks. Sam?
I realize that this will probably show up in department meetings and stuff, but could you, to the extent that you can, talk a little bit about what the issues are with teaching adjustment? And, obviously it'll be something that will be coming up, I'm sure, but what were you talking about with chairs, if you can?
Oh, you mean the adjustment of the
Of teaching load, yes.
workload, yeah. So, I'm using this because I think it's being recorded, so in any case, well, last year I started talking, and I think before I came here, there was talk on campus about addressing the teaching load, meaning we typically talk about it, or I do, in terms of 3-4 versus 3-3, but it's more complex than that. So we have to look at student credit hours, we have to look at the level of the course, the amount of work that goes into it, and so forth. So the idea is that we're aspiring in the next 2 academic years. We'll start a year from now, it's not starting this academic year. We'll aspire to rebalance that so people are spending less time teaching, and that then will open up time and opportunities for them to work on grant writing, grant development, and research. It is not intended to say, so I presented yesterday, like all of the deans did, to the Provost Council, and when I presented this, I said, it's not to say congratulations, and I'm not saying you read, okay? Congratulations, you have worked so hard, we're giving you 1 fewer courses, and, do what you want with that time, No, the idea is that without extra time, you can't possibly look for a grant, write a grant, work on a project, right? You need time. And so this is what we're hoping the result will be. And we're going to also have to provide supports on how to seek out a grant, how to write a grant, how to administer a grant once you get it. There are people in this room who have had success doing that. And so I've asked a few people if they would talk at a brown bag about it. And so that'll be one of the brown bags coming up. Does that help? I'm anticipating a 2-year rollout. That might be too fast. Talking to the chairs, I'm not sure everyone agrees that can happen. But if we could get the bulk of it done, 22, 23, 23, 24, I think that would be good. If we don't put a date on it, even if we have to be flexible and push some of it back, if we don't put a date on it, I fear we never start, and we never end. So I don't think that's too ambitious. I still don't think it's too ambitious, and we'll see what happens. It will happen differently in every department. Half the college might go through this 1 year, but other departments might not be able to for different reasons, and so that might come the next year, and it might differ in your department. So maybe, some people will see that reduction one, some the next year. There's a lot of, I think, flexibility we have to be prepared for. Yes?
Yeah, in relation to that, over the years when we've made attempts to change workload at this university, it's been thwarted by system. Is there a commitment now at system level for us making this move toward R2? Is there a commitment so that we are not, once again, making some changes here with hopes and then not being able to realize them?
That's my understanding. There's no question that that's what we're doing, okay? I don't know all the formal commitments yet. I'm still very new at this, and knowing about the system, that's the commitment. So all of the deans yesterday presented on how to move their colleges to R2. That's our assumption moving forward. Yeah. Yes.
So regarding the emphasis on grants, I totally understand why that would be desirable, but as I'm sure we all know, there's a big difference disciplinarily regarding which disciplines have grant opportunities or not. So, grant opportunities for a research psychologist versus, say, a scholar of 18th century philosophy is just, not that much out there. So will there be?
Well, you're good to point that out. There's going to be an imbalance, okay? But the chairs heard me Wednesday at our retreat talk about the beginning of my career. I started at a Research One university abroad, so it was very consistent. But I was required to either bring in or create grant projects that brought in money every year from year one. It's a very different thing than what we'll have here because we aren't a Research One. What it forced me to do was to get to know people who would either be on my project or would invite me onto theirs from different disciplines. So I very quickly got to know in that faculty lounge and faculty cafeterias, I very quickly got to know sociologists, political scientists, and that's these are the people we ended up getting grants with. People from the literature department, they had this very different type of department. They cut history up into all different departments. So you'd have economic history as one department, political, and so forth. So we had a history person we worked with very closely. I don't believe we had a philosopher, but we could have. No reason we couldn't have. Very successful, right? When I left, I was on a grant. I came here on a grant like that. So I think we don't have to just think like how can we interact and collaborate within our college. Some people in this room are collaborating, for example, with the sciences. There's room in COFAC too. There might be in other colleges. And so over time, I'm not saying over 1 or 2 years, for some people it happens very quickly because they've already started doing some of this. But for other people, it might be 6, 7 years before they actually get to the point where they can do that. But we have to start that process. I know I should tell you, I've had a number of meetings and conversations with Dean Vanko about ways some of our programs can collaborate. Those are very important. I'm hoping that from those, collaborations, we can move into some grant writing. In that case, it's environmental studies, but GIS, geography. I admit philosophy is more difficult. But the humanities, NEH is one source, but there are other sources for the humanities. There are a number of big grants out there. They emerged, some emerged last year, some existed beforehand, have to directly relate to democracy. And so I think there are many opportunities to at least start the process. Anyone who's gone out and tried to get grants, thanks, that was a great question, knows that often you have to submit, resubmit, and resubmit again. And so if we could get a grant coordinator in the college, they could really help with that, okay? And they can help any one of you who might get rejected that first year feel like, that's okay, that's normal. That's the start of success. Some people get the award the first year, but that's not common. What we don't want is for you to spend all that time and effort 1 year and then say, okay, they said no, I'm done, can't do it. No. If the grant person can help you figure out, is your idea, is your project actually fundable? And may even be able to make some suggestions on how to make the presentation differently. So when I came on a sabbatical to DC in 2000, 2001, and I sat at the Kennan Institute in the Wilson Center in Washington, DC, it took me 3 years to get them. I really wanted it, okay? And they're a public policy institute, at least they still are, and they were then. I didn't do anything that had to do with public policy. I was looking at that time, I was still writing my first book, and I was then looking at Russian peasant religious practices in the late 19th century. What does that have to do with policy? Well, after I lost the grant the second time, I finally called them up and said, what happened? And they said, well, it wasn't connected to public policy. So I didn't change my research, but I started to understand that it was also working on identity and how religion informed this emerging sense of ethnic and national identity. So I wrote my next proposal as something that was relevant to public policy, to understanding what emerging post-Soviet Russian nationality and national identity and nationalism might mean. That wasn't untrue. I had never thought of making that connection. So I sat there, wrote my book, and I'm very happy to have had the time, experience, and the opportunity to meet with people and start thinking differently about higher ed, that there has to be a really strong connection to what goes on outside the world. At the University of Helsinki, it was mostly about research at that time. I would talk to my history colleagues and say, well, does anyone ask the students or help them figure out what they're going to do with their degree when they get done? Like, no, it's not our job. Period. So I got a very different sense of what I wanted to do in higher ed from that experience. All right, I think we have time for a few more questions. Yes, Connie.
I appreciate the importance, the underscoring of grants. I think that in addition to encouraging people to get involved in grant writing, it's important to re-examine the promotion and tenure process as well, because we have very strict definitions of what scholarship is, and as a grant writer and a successful grant writer, I can tell you that the grant writing, the process, leading the grants, etc., is considered service. For the university, we all have way more service than we need. And yes, it is possible to take your grant work and write a paper and publish it, but your grant work might not lend itself to that, or your grant work and your teaching responsibilities and your other service commitments may mean that that is not the most meaningful focus of your valuable time and energy and expertise. So it's a bit of a conundrum when we are asking people to engage in what are very comprehensive endeavors, and when maybe it would just be best for me to write a paper about the indigenous influence in religious texts of the 16th century in Mexico, because it would be less of a global effort.
So everything you say, I think, is important, because alignment is really important. I hate to use a word like alignment, but it really is about trying to figure out how the pieces should fit together as we make this change. And it can't be just us. It won't be just you. Not everyone will be able to have a grant-worthy project, right? So I'm not saying everyone needs to have a grant, but the college as a whole has to. There are places where we have people engaged in research who don't apply for grants. And yet their scholarly output is tremendous. That's not going to help us get to the R2 status. It's about, the grant production and receipt of that money is counted. Okay, and that's what we have to think about. It helps us too, because every grant, hopefully almost every grant, will have indirect costs funding. That comes back to you, your department, to me, the provost, that we can pour into supporting other people, or you too, in other grant efforts. Students should be written into those grants, right? As often as possible, so that we're providing them undergraduate, graduate research opportunities, and we're paying them for it. So that's important too. So that's where you connect with teaching maybe. But in general, we need to try to reorient the way we think. In terms of PTRM, yeah, an adjustment has to be made. And at least in our college, the adjustment might start next year when we review all of our PTRM documents, but it has to be at the university level as well. And I don't know who's going to lead that, but I'm sure that someone will. Thank you. Any other questions? Everyone wants to go to the reception, right?
didn't realize there was.
Right, well, you know where to find me if you have questions, right, not just now, but later. Thanks for coming, I appreciate it, good luck, welcome back, have a great fall semester, all right?